Ladies and gentlemen, everybody listening to this podcast, thank you once again for coming back for another episode of Danger to Manifold. We would like to start off this episode with a 5-second moment of silence for our fallen brother. Thank you. Near and dear to our hearts, anybody who's big into cars and automotives most likely knows that since the last time we've recorded an episode, we have lost a hero to many of us, Mr. Ken Block. Famous driver, famous businessman, and inspiration personified. Awesome dude, mid-50s, just living life, man. Mike, I don't know. I know he gave you your whole style, and everything you do is based on him. So, if you got any kind words for your hero.
Ken Block's an interesting guy because he's kind of the guy we all want to be. He just goes drifting in whatever he wants to drift. And I first sort of, obviously he did the work and his focus and all that, and he did a great job. But it was when he built the 65, I think it was a 65 or 66 Mustang, and he chose a notchback Mustang instead of the fastback that everyone loves. And I like that too because my buddy has a 66 notchback. And just showed the world you could do this in a 40-year-old, 50-year-old car. And, he's within inches of his targets, right? Like just absolutely ridiculous. And it's, his obviously, bit of a trailblazer with the, setting a high production value on basically, a long form dance in a car, so to speak. So definitely a visionary, somebody who, really helped elevate the car world and get people into car scene. Even non-car people know who Ken Block is. So, and his cars are, they're kind of rat rod stuff, but not like pieces of shit. So he had good style. He was a phenomenal driver. And, just like, one of those like influential people that we lost too soon, Paul Walker obviously being the other one for me personally, but those are, I guess, some of my immediate just armchair thoughts on the bit. He'll be missed.
So we, Mike and Larry here at the podcast, would love to encourage you to take some time, go watch some of the big famous videos, see what this guy was capable of if you haven't already. And if you have, go back for a second watch. The least we can do is just let some memory extension happen. Like give your brain some time to just really see the magnificence that this man brought to automotives, to wheels, to fun, to shredding, ripping around, and you name it, he's done it. Gymkhana series is probably the big one. So go look it up. It's on YouTube. It's free. Drop some positive comments, but definitely, support our brother, support his family, and anything that you can do to just spend a little time in his memory and in his honor today. We would love that. So thank you. Rest in peace, Ken Block.
Yep. Amen.
Still an inspiration. Still an inspiration. I could start now and try and train every day. And he would at the end of my life, he'd be like, yeah, not bad, kid.
You're okay.
You're almost there.
It's funny, speaking about his skill, it was like, my buddy texts me and he's into cars, but not like, crazy diehard, at least not yet. And he asked me how he went, and I was like, "Oh, it's a snowmobile accident." And he was like, "Oh, I could have sworn it would have been from a car accident because obviously he was into cars." And I was like, "Nah, man, you ever seen this guy drive? That was never gonna take him. He was way too good at that. Like, there's no way there's no way. Like, he could put a car in a parallel park. He could drift a car into a parallel parking spot if he only had an inch on each side. Like, there was no way that was ever going to take him. Like, it's got to be some freak, something else, So yeah, the second I heard, I knew it wasn't driving a car. I knew for sure. But
some of those videos where you'll see him drifting along a cliffside, and they do the super slow mo, and you see that back wheel just being not even half an inch away from, oh fuck, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Insane skill, insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really wild.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't even practice that. You know what I'm saying?
I've only seen a handful of people who can drive that well. Tanner Faust comes to mind. He's a pretty damn good drifter, but Ken Block was just exceptional at, you know, like I can recover from power slide. I can, you know, do a drift without killing myself. But I mean, I drive an AP1 S2000. Like anyone who knows that car is like, that rear will go on you like that, and I can drive that car just fine. But I feel like the most bush league amateur toddler driving when, you know, when you stand next to some like a giant like that. It's wild. It's just inspiration to us all. Like, you're never going to hit that, but you know, it's the Van Halen of the car world or whatever. But it's just like, yeah, it's crazy, and it's, you know, the world lost out on a lot of great, you know, I mean, well, first and foremost, obviously the world lost out on a good man, and, you know, hearts out to his family and friends, but also the world lost, you know, a lot of culture there too, like, because he made people, in addition to just the things he did directly, he also just made a lot of people happy with his work.
It's interesting the parallels between like the child experience for like Steve Irwin. You know, Steve Irwin's untimely passing, but his kid was kind of following in the footsteps and then takes over the family business in a lot of ways. And so I know Ken Block's daughter is also essentially doing the same. They were working on cars together, and she was working on a big project, I think, around the time of his passing. And so, you know, I'm bittersweet silver lining here, but, you know, I do hope that she continues to carry the legacy and just do the name proud and be herself, do it her way. But like, you know what I mean? Like it would just be nice to know that she continues to grow and prosper and continue to love this the same way that her father did. So if I can pray and hope for anything, I hope that there is some comfort in that taking place.
Yeah, here's hoping. Yeah.
Man, I don't even want to do a comical segue like I normally try to, but we do have a topic this week that we do want to share with you guys. Mike doesn't have a lot of friends. Here I go. And so instead of calling me up and asking me questions, he decided to talk to a computer for a while. And it's probably smart, because I'm sure the computer would have done better than I would have had he asked me these questions. Mike, why don't you lead in and tell the folks what the first little piece of news is for this week's podcast?
So for those of you that don't know, Larry and I also work in the game industry. He's a designer and I'm an engineer. So, you know, we always keep our heads to the ground. And, you know, this AI has been pretty crazy, been pretty hot over the last, I don't know how long, but the newest thing is ChatGPT, right? Which is, you know, you see all these articles probably running in your feed. Oh, this AI bot's gonna replace Google because you can just ask it anything and it'll totally tell you the answer. And we're all out of jobs, and, you know, just all this sort of hysteria around the typical any advance you get that, so to speak. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try this out. You know, I like to think I know a thing or two about cars, so, you know, let's ask ChatGPT some questions. And I didn't get too far into it because a lot of people don't really understand what ChatGPT is. They think it scours the internet, or they think it codes for you, or they think whatever, like, and that's just not what it is. But I'll get more on that in a second. But I went ahead and asked it some basic questions. I was like, well, I know LSO engines pretty well, right? So I was like, okay, what's the difference between an LS2 and an LS3? For those of you who don't know, an LS2 was the second rendition of GM's Gen 3/Gen 4 engine, which the LS1 debuted in '98, I believe. And it's a family of blocks, but the LS1, 2, and 3 are perhaps the most popular because they were the three iterations. The first being in the old Camaros, the second being in the GTO and a few other cars, and then the third being in the Corvettes and the newest Camaro. Well, actually, the LS2 was in the Corvette too, but well, so was the LS1. They were all in the Corvettes. But anyway, so I asked the differences between them, and it gave me a really boilerplate answer, right? Oh, the displacement's different. They're, you know, one has more power than the other. It's like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but like, what are so I was like, what are the internal differences, right? Like, see if they knew what they were talking about. Gave me four distinct answers. Larry, tell me how many of them were right.
0 out of 4.
No, it ain't that bad. It ain't that bad, Larry. It's not you. It's not you.
Okay, I'll double it. Technically speaking, 2 out of 4.
That's right. That's exactly right. Got 2 out of 4. And it was just like,
my experiences with ChatGPT have been about, like, in a similar vein, I asked it about bodybuilding. And I was like, oh, if I'm trying to hit a certain amount on my bench press, what should I do? and it put together a program, but it explained why it was asking me to do all the things that it was asking me to do. And I was like, if it wasn't me, like, this would be believable. Like, this is good enough to get me the progress. And like, it wasn't telling me wrong things, but it didn't have the nuance is what I found. It didn't have that, like, that deeper level understanding of what it was saying based on my first experience.
Oh, this was flat out wrong. It's like, first it was all like, oh yeah, the LS3 has a higher compression ratio than the LS2. And I was all like, are you sure? And he's like, yes, the compression ratio for an LS3 is like 11.7 to 1. I was like, I wish.
Yeah.
It would make like 500 horsepower if that was true, but no, that's not true at all. So,
one on that one?
Yeah, it's 10.7 to 1. So they was off by 1, right? Okay. And the LS2 actually has a higher compression ratio. I believe it's 10.9 to 1. So that was one thing. And then the next thing it got wrong was, it got some stuff right. Like it knew that LS2 is square port, or excuse me, cathedral port, and the LS3 is square port, and all that stuff. It knew the displacement, stuff like that. But then it was all like, oh yeah, also, the LS2 has a traditional fuel rail injection, whereas the LS3 has direct port injection. I was like, no, that's not true. That's not true at all. The LT one has that. The LS3 doesn't have that. So it was like, the reason we brought this up is because it's really easy to get excited about these technologies and be like, I don't need a mechanic. I'm just going to ask this AI bot what's wrong with my car, and it'll totally tell me. And the problem is, it's not just going to be like, oh, here's what's wrong, or oh, I don't know. It's going to very confidently tell you something that might very well be wrong. And the more technical it is, the more likely it's going to be wrong. And it's really easy to find simple technical differences between like engines per se. But the nitty gritty, no one really pays attention to. And the litmus test is like, how long would it take you to find the information on Google? If it's more than it's the first result, then there's a good chance ChatGPT is going to be wrong. Not because it scours the internet, but just because that's a decent litmus test of how difficult it is to find something. So you have to be really careful, because it's gonna, like Larry said, it's gonna sound really believable, but it's also gonna be wrong, right? And it doesn't do this on just technical things. If you asked ChatGPT, one of my favorite ones is, if you take 10, for all you math people, if you take 10% away from a number, and then you take that new number and add 10% to it, what number do you get? Larry, what do you think that is?
You would get a number less than the original number.
Correct, exactly. ChatGPT was like, you'd get the same number. Oh. And it's like, and the reason for that is because it's not doing the calculation. It doesn't do math. It doesn't, anytime it gives you a code snippet, it's not coding. It has a database of information, and it's a language model. It puts together language based off of the information it has available to it. So, it's not technically looking at a Stack Overflow article, but basically when it's giving you a code snippet, it's literally just giving you information it has available. It has no idea what it's saying to you. It's a language model. It doesn't have any processing as you would think about it in sort of the traditional AI sense. So it's really important that like the information it references can very well be wrong, and it will have no context for that whatsoever, right? In the case of the 11.7 to 1, it probably is going off of a piece of data where somebody fat-fingered 1 instead of 0. Right? That's probably what happened. So, don't trust ChatGPT. So go forums. They have not been outclassed. You still need to go to forums. You still need to do all of the old things, YouTube videos that we've all been doing. ChatGPT will not replace it. It's a good starting point for basic stuff, but anything nitty gritty and technical, I would not trust it. Not yet. Not for car stuff. So Mike's recommendation, the resident mechanic, don't trust ChatGPT, or you'll destroy your car.
Right now, in my opinion, it feels like, that student who, like, you could tell didn't read the book, but is doing the book report.
Yeah, because he just glanced at the Wikipedia overview or whatever.
Yeah. ChatGPT is currently around that level. I'm impressed by its ability to sound conversational, right? Like to the words that's using, the phrasing, the flow of the language structure as it's like kind of introducing and like giving you body and then like wrapping it up. Like I'm impressed by what has been created, knowing that it's like an algorithmic response to like a prompt that you put in. But as far as it being a tool that you can bet your life on when asking it these types of questions, I mean, user experience may vary.
Yeah, if you ask what brake pads you need for a racetrack, you may set your brakes on fire. So just, I mean, it's great for like creative stuff. Like if you need ideas for a name or something, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. But not for if your life depends on this. I don't trust it. Don't trust it.
It's fun to use, though. Don't get me wrong. I was impressed. I liked what I saw. I thought it was cool. And I can see if today is the acorn, the oak tree version of this is going to be amazing. I'm also very scared of the oak tree version of this because the world economy is going to be so different in a lot of ways. But yeah, thank God that's not today.
Indeed.
Cool. So, guys, you know, we normally do segments on the show, especially if you've been a long-time listener. To all the long-time listeners, shout out to you guys. Thank you for supporting us and being here. And in the interest of freshening up the show as we move forward in 2023 and beyond, I came up with a new segment, and we're going to launch it on this version of the show. It's called Toast It or Roast It. And, you know, it's basically face value what you hear. We want to talk about a thing, and we're either going to toast it, which is a good thing, like, you know, cheers, toast, this is great, or roast it, which is like, this is a POS, and we're going to tell you why. But it's not just like a one topic thing. Like, for example, today I want to do a toasted or roasted on the 2024 Ford Mustang. And we want to talk about the features, we want to talk about the power, the specs, anything that we can, and we're either going to toast it or roast it. So by the time that we're finished, hopefully we do a full breakdown of what we like or don't like about the 2024 Mustang. So, Mike, we're going to do a toasted or roasted. Are you ready?
Yes. Okay. I was looking at something. It turns out, I was just thinking right before we started, I don't actually know if this is on a new platform or not, believe it or not. Is this still the S550 or is it different?
S650 now.
Okay, so it is technically a different platform.
It's technically a new platform.
Gotcha. It's not too much info on it yet, but all right. Anyway.
We can go into some details and see. Like, oh, look at all this is still the same. But, yeah.
But this is more a style thing. But anyway.
All right. Speaking of style, let's just start with the obvious. We're going to start with looks. Mike, I'm going to serve the ball to you first. Toast it or roast it. How does the 2024 Mustang look to you? How does it look? Just the looks.
If I could boil, if
Camaro does this,
jokes, it's got jokes. If I could sum it up in one word, I would say inoffensive. And expanding on that, it's basically when coming off the latest. So S550 had two real iterations. There was the swoopy up headlights and the swoopy down headlights, I think is the best way to refer to it. I was fine with both. I didn't particularly feel one was a whole lot better than the other, and a lot of people are going to freak out. They think the first one was better, but yeah, whatever. This one is more of the same to me. It's nothing wows me about any of the changes, but at the same time, nothing is offensive about any of the changes either. Do I have a preference? Yeah, probably. But if you gifted me this car, I wouldn't vomit on it. I'd be like, it's just another Mustang. They all kind of look the same, but no, I'm kidding. That's not entirely true. But yeah, that's kind of my first thoughts on it. Larry, how about you?
Sure. So before I give my answer, I do want to give one additional rule to the audience listening. The main and most important rule of toasted or roasted is there are only two options, and they are polar opposites. There is no middle ground. We are not allowed to say undecided. We are not allowed to say even. We have to put $1 more on one side of the scale, either $1 more in toasted or $1 more in roasted.
And right after I give the most middle of the road answer. All right, go.
I'm in the looks department. I'm in the roasted camp. I think that for what would be, I would say 3 models in a row that I feel like share a lot of similarities. From their profile, from their stance, and the way that they look. I was hoping for a little bit more of a drastic departure this time around, and I did not get that in the ways that I was excited about. I think the angular shape of the taillights kind of going in and then receding back out, like having this like V shape in the taillights, it looks very weird to me. I am not a fan. The chunkiness of the lights kind of feels weird. It feels a little cheap, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't feel very aggressive. It doesn't feel cohesive as a design, and it's just a very weird kind of design element. Like I've seen lights that are angular to the sides, right? Like if you look at Lamborghini lights or like things that make beams that go to the side of the car, but not actually like in the depth of the car. Like somebody took a chunk out of the rear of your car and left you with a slice of cake missing. That's kind of how I feel like the taillights look to me. And taillights and headlights are a big part of the presentation for me. And then also the headlights are changed, definitely more modern. The technology behind it, great. I'm sure the projection is better, but I hate that we don't have like a singular bulb and it's like the 3 bulbs on each side kind of losing the eyes, and now we have alien eyes. If anything, it's they let me down there. The hood, I absolutely hate the hood on the GT. Like I don't even want to start on it. I get it. We're borrowing some heat extraction, stuff that we found on when we did this for the GT 500, and now we're kind of borrowing the stylings on the GT. And the front bumper. I mean, I'm a huge hater on the looks. I think the car is probably fantastic to drive and fun, but if you're just asking me on the looks, I'm in the roasted department. I'm not excited by the way that the GT looks. I actually think the V6 or the EcoBoost version, or like the base version, I think that looks more suitable. And I think the GT is like trying too hard in so many different ways, and the design doesn't come together. Like it doesn't feel like they all work together to make one appealing presentation of a car. It feels like a couple of piecemeal things, shapes and lines that don't go in the same direction, and just I feel all over the place and just very uneasy about how the car looks, unfortunately. So I'm a roasted big time.
Okay. So I was under the impression that we were going to go over each like part, like, oh, what are the headlights? Or toasted or roasted? Like blah blah. Apparently I'm wrong. So
we'll be on looks all day.
No, hold on. I feel like I need to. I thought that was just the intro, but if it's a toasted or a roasted, and we're getting right into the looks overall as a package, then let me redeem myself and tell you why. I'm gonna go ahead and toast it. All right. And the reason for that is, ironically, you're gonna think this is funny, but it's everything about the car that makes it a little closer to a Camaro. Believe it or not, it's funny. So let me get to it. I'll start with just the general stance. One of my biggest complaints on the Mustang ever since 1964 and a half is the lack of hips, right? The Mustang has always been bland. It's always been very, from the headlight all the way back to the taillight, has been just one straight line, with the one notable exception of like 69 and 70. Those were like the 2 years where they actually had some hips, much like my Camaro, which has massive hips, right? 69 and 70 were the only like years they really did that. Every other year, that's of consequence, which is basically 64 and a half to 68 before 69 and 70. And then the New Edge did it too, if you even want to count that. But really the revival, the 05 to literally today, if you look at the profile of all of them, it's one straight line from the headlight back to the taillight, with the exception of the S550, the latest version, finally put a little bit of hip in it, but there's still like a hard line that goes all the way back. And that always bugged me, because like you look at my Camaro, and after the doors, man, that top belt line just boom, just comes right out, these massive hips that just give it that muscle feel that I'm after. And like my Charger's the same way. Like the rear hips on the Charger and the Camaro and my newer Camaro, it's a table. It's like you could play a game of chess on it. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I always love that look because it just gives it this stance and this presence. And the thing about the new 2024 Mustang is, for the first time, it actually has rear hips. Like it actually really has rear hips. I actually saw one in person at the LA Auto Show months back, but it has hips. So the stance and even the front fender is like, there's a little bit more of a bulge. It's not just a straight line forward. And I appreciate that. I actually think it makes, when you just look at the profile and don't focus on the details, the car's stance looks far, far better than the S550, in my opinion. It is a much better stance. It is much more muscular. It looks like the S550 hit the gym and got some muscles, right? This is ironic coming from me versus Larry, because we're the exact opposite. But anyway, so I'm really a huge fan on that. The rear end, I like the rear end, actually, ironically, because it actually does look a little bit more like a Camaro. But I see what you're saying about the taillights, but they don't offend me. I think they're fine. They look good. I have no issue with them. I'm liking the more angular rear quarter window. It's not, marketably above the S550, but I like it. They got a good accoutrement, a spoiler setup. The front end is a little like I'm not sold on the headlights. I think there you and I agree. The headlights not the three. I'm a stickler for the old style. I like a nice like round projector, and then you can do whatever fancy stuff you want with the LEDs around it. But like I do want that at least one solid eye looking projector. Like my Camaro has cat eyes on it. The last iteration of the S550 had that very, very prominent projector with the three LED gills in front of it, which is very classic. So I'm not sold. And if I was going to buy this car, that's the first thing I'd replace. I'd dump the headlights and maybe even the front bumper and find a front fascia that is a little more within the previous style. Otherwise, though, I think it looks good. I think the overall body shape is a marketed improvement.
Cool. Funny enough, Mike, I remember when the quote unquote, and I'm doing the air quotes for Mike to see, but I have to describe it for the audience. When the first images leaked, I remember at least 40 or 50 comments on all the forums that I visit just to see what people were saying. They said they weren't making any more Camaros and like all those kind of jokes. Everyone was saying it looks so much like a Camaro. From the side, I think it got the most like this looks such like a Camaro comments that I had seen. I think that side shot. And also, I encourage you guys listening, if you can, pull up some images while we talk about this. Like, this podcast will hit home even more so. You'll find if you agree with me or if you agree with Mike, based on what we're saying, if you can actually see it yourself too. So feel free to pull this up while listening to this wonderful podcast about cars, project cars, and the car lifestyle. And, you may as well hit subscribe while you're doing that too. I don't mind a little shameless plug. We pulled all the advertising, so one commercial is not so bad.
But yeah, it is funny. The things I like about it are definitely Camaro. I mean, what can I say? Camaro's got the styling right.
Yeah. Mike, I'll let you pick the next set of topics or the next section to kind of go over. We can do the interiors. We can do the performance. We can even do the model lineup. I think those would be three things that we could talk about, but I'll let you take your pick.
Let's go ahead and do the interior as I try and find what it looks like. Take it away, Larry. Interior, toasted or roasted?
Funny enough, now, like, I'm a toasted. I think that over the last couple of generations, and I know the Mustang has gotten more expensive, and although I do old man Kane complain about the price of cars going up, I'm not so mad that the features of cars are going up. I don't know how I can keep the price the same but get the features, but hopefully... Anyway, let me get off that. Let me stop advertising. The interior, I think, looks nice. I love that we're getting a notch steering wheel kind of with the car. And I actually do like the infotainment screens that cars seem to be doing now. Like started with BMW, Audi kind of cars. I think those are the ones where I saw it first. Now even like Kia and like Ford and like even just base model anything, Hondas are doing like the little flat custom infotainment screens. Gone are the days where you could go to Best Buy and just buy your $200, Sony Explode head unit and throw that in there. Now you're basically getting your screens from the factory. But I like it. I do like the modern approach. It feels cool to hit the digital buttons and sliders and, set the settings on your car that way. It just feels, you feel the value in that. It's not classic. Don't get me wrong. If you're, older than me and Mike, and you remember the days where your car had a carburetor engine and a battery and a gas tank, you're
what are you talking about? My car has a carburetor and a battery and a gas tank.
Like not much more than that. You know what I mean? Like when one person could list all the parts that their car took to put together, we are far from those days, my friend. And so now your seat has electronics. Your door has electronics. Your windshield wipers damn near have Bluetooth connection to let you know when they're out of fluid. Like everything is tapped in. We are in the Internet of Things era. But I'm actually a fan of the comforts on the inside. Give me a Lamborghini luxury experience on the inside, and I just mean like top level. I don't necessarily mean Lamborghini's interior because sometimes they haven't actually done that well. But give me like the Rolls Royce on the interior and the fucking fastest thing I can afford on the exterior, and you will make me a happy man. So I'm always glad to see like Corvette spend a lot more time in trying to make their interiors better. And then also the new Mustang is kind of doing the same. I like the direction that it's going in. I hope they don't just do like the tried and true, like, hey, we're going to put these screens in every Ford, and that's how we make this cheap, which I understand. But like, you know, you kind of want your Mustang to feel like it's a sporty car through and through. I don't ever want to sit in my Mustang and be reminded of Ford Edge. You know, this is the Ford Edge screen. This is the Ford Edge shift knob. This is the Ford, I don't know, what other vehicles. This is the Ford Fusion's seats and like all that kind of stuff. I know you got to bring the cost down Ford, but yeah, I like the interior, and I'll leave it at that. I'm a toast it.
I am most certainly a roasted on the interior, but like without even, I mean, I think you got the flat bottom steering wheel, and that's about it, right?
That's the only thing you like?
Well, I mean, I don't even like that because I actually don't like the airbag at all. I thought the last airbag was way, way nicer, which ironically looks more like my Camaro or steering wheel. But all right. I'm just going to keep referencing the Camaro. Now, the circle, the chrome trim ring on the circle airbag, I always think is classic. It's very Aston Martin. The new one just looks like a very low poly version of a circle, which is kind of weird. The Mustang logo is fine, but it just makes the wheel look cheap. Just makes it really look cheap. I don't like that. But my biggest gripe on the car is actually the damn screen. Like, it's just, I hate it. Like, first of all, I'm a stickler for like actual analog gauges. I like to see a real set of needles. Like, I don't care if everything else is digital, give me real needles. Like, I like that three-dimensional feel, like there's actually something that was built and not just somebody glued an iPad to the dash and called it a day, right? And just programmed something. That it always was lame. And when I was younger, like, yeah, that would have been cool because like maybe I can customize what the needles look like and blah, 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 blah. No, I want something that looks classic and like took some craftsmanship to make. This is just, you know, speedo.png. Like, all right, cool, I guess. But like
your Winamp skin.
Yeah, but that annoys me just when they do that in general. But the worst part of this one specifically is that they don't even have like a gauge cluster, anything. It's literally, they just took an iPad and jammed it on top of the steering wheel, and it looks like that's what they did. So like, you know, it used to be like you'd have like this ornate gauge cluster that was like a thing, and they had a hood so that you know the sun wouldn't blur it out and stuff like that. And like, yeah, this is probably a pretty high definition panel, so the sun reflection is not going to be too bad on it, but it just looks cheap. And now the worst part is it extends over all the way to the center console. So you have the world's largest iPad that just crashed into your dash, and it just looks like it's not supposed to be there. The companies have been doing this forever. They usually don't have a huge one like that. Benz does these days, I think, but they integrated it a little more cleaner. They don't just like tack it in there. But I've always hated the center screen that just literally looks like somebody duct taped an iPad to the dash. Like, because there's no design there. There's no design there. It looks so tacked on and so cheap. It's like, it looks like you took an old car and converted it to have an electronic display by hot glue gunning in a iPad screen. It looks like crap. I hate it. I have hated it, and they're just doing it even more and even more in more of a cheat. They're just literally throwing that screen on there like it's no design at all. I hate that. Furthermore, I hate it when they put all the controls on the screen, because when I drive, I don't look at what I'm touching. I feel it. Like, if I want the next, like, yeah, they have steering wheel controls for most stuff now, and that's fine. But HVAC and all that other stuff, it's always muscle memory. I never look at this, because that's dangerous. I don't take my eyes off the road. So it's always like you sort of lean on the shifter and you know, move your hand up to sort of click all the buttons. And you can't do that on a touchscreen. And every car I have that has a touchscreen infuriates the crap. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. My Camaro doesn't have any of that crap. There's no touchscreen. It's all buttons, so I don't have to worry about it. All my other cars are just buttons. I like buttons because it's why I don't play games on my phone. No buttons. Like, if I have to look at what I'm pressing, I can't feel it, then the experience is lost, especially when you're having to hit buttons that you're not supposed to look at. Imagine playing a video game like Smash Brothers or Mario or something, but you had to look at what the D-pad when you pressed it. Like, you can't play a game that way. Like, there's no way. And so it's the same thing with cars. So I absolutely hate that they put everything on the screen. Don't get me wrong. There's great things about screens that have, output for the car and what's happening to it and all that other stuff. That's all wonderful. But when you pipe the controls through there too, it means you either need a co-pilot or you need to really stop to press the buttons. Otherwise, you can't just sit there and stare at it. So whereas you can just hit the tactile stuff. So I absolutely hate that, both in functionality and in look, but really in look, because it looks terrible.
See, now you're playing the game right.
The rest of it's inoffensive, very similar to what it was before, and I don't know if I have any real gripes to it.
I do want to add one last thing. I really did cry that they lost I call them the pilot switches, the little airplane gauges, or not gauges, but the airplane switches that you have on the bottom of like the S550 generation Mustang. I love those. It's a small touch, but I absolutely love them, and I was really sad to see that those were gone.
They did take them out. They had that little bar on the bottom. I thought those were the switches, but they're not. It's just a little.
Those are just buttons. Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah, that's lame.
That was a mistake right there. In my opinion, that was a mistake.
Dude, this is so the low poly version of a S550 Mustang interior. Honestly, it really is. It's like the S550 was on GameCube, and this is the N64 version. Oh. It is, man. Yeah, like, not a fan. Not a fan.
So I'm looking at a couple of different pictures of the screen, and I totally get it. It does feel like the Best Buy special. I do like the gauges that feel like they flow with the interior lines of the panels, and maybe even recessed into like the console behind the driver's steering wheel. But I don't know. I'm a fan of the screens and technology.
I'll tell you, the Camaro has a digital screen too, but it's actually in a gauge cluster. Go figure. They did it right.
Well,
and so does the 400Z, by the way. So I just think a lot of car manufacturers are using digital gauges correctly, and this is just a huge, cheap miss. Just really, really looks cheap.
All right. Well, it's my turn to pick the next topic. Let's talk about the model lineup. So, can confirm we have base model EcoBoost, which we reserve for the 4-cylinder with turbocharge. I also know that we have the GT coming, which, okay. We have the Dark Horse coming, which is slightly better than the GT, but I'm sure the dealer is going to make sure that it is quite a pretty penny more expensive than the GT. I believe we will have the GT 500 for sure, and I've heard rumors that we may see some sort of return between the Dark Horse or like a GT 350 kind of level car, and I don't know if that's explicitly the Dark Horse or not. Like, there might be another comparable model. A Mach 1 I feel like kind of sits in that category as well. The like not GT 500 money, but also factory better performance than the GT. There's usually like a couple of models that Ford releases like in that category. And I don't have all the details on what models there will be, but I'm a big fan of the idea of a Dark Horse. I like anybody who's making muscle cars leaning into like an aggressive kind of sinister vibe. If it's in naming, if it's in design, if it's in driving experience and tactile feel, if any part of you feels like you just have a beast and other people know that you just have this beast, like the amount of respect that I think Hellcats got the first 2-3 years when those cars were out. I mean, even still, but like, when they first came out, like when the GTR, the R35 GTR first came out, like those first 2-3 years, everybody was like, oh, damn, the GTR.
And are you going to get to the toasting and the roasting part, or?
Hold on, let me.
You're already singing his praises, man.
For me, it's gonna be a roast. It's gonna be a roast. I think that I'm sure the GT500 is gonna be insane. It's already a more powerful power plant to start from before they slap on superchargers, or if they make an all new motor, we can do some more research and find out. I wish they pushed harder on the Dark Horse to separate it from performance-wise from the GT. I really wish they had a better looking logo for the Dark Horse, because I think we even talked about this on the podcast before. When you're driving by and you glance to the left at the car on your left, you glance to the right at the car on your right, and you see like the Hellcat screaming beast, especially one with the little red jewel, if you can pick up on that, you get a feeling like, oh, damn. You know what I mean? Like, when I look to the left and the Dark Horse rolls up and I see that horse vagina logo, it doesn't. and I know I'm literally just talking about a badge on the side of a car, but like I don't get that sense of aggression. It's not facing forward into the wind. It's not a profile shot, which is what I would have done because you get speed lines when you do it that way. It's like a horseshoe with a horse in the middle of the horseshoe, and it just looks silly. Like it really does look silly. It doesn't have an iconic presence, and I'm not just hating on the Dark Horse, but I think that like I really would have been a toasted if the Dark Horse pushed harder. And I think that of all the models that I know coming out, since I wanted the Dark Horse to be more than it is, I feel like it's a roast it for me because Ford, I love what the Dark Horse is supposed to be. Like you go buy a car that you can just rip up on tracks and like have fun. Awesome. I wish though, like honestly, I'd give you guys another 15,000 if your Dark Horse was like, let's call it 547 horsepower factory, something like that. With all the other, let's call it, let's see, what am I looking for? The suspension options that we're going to get, everything else cool. But I definitely think you need to like at least throw in more than an air intake's worth of horsepower difference between the GT and the Dark Horse because you want this thing to sell. You want people to be excited about it. I know you're speaking to a different customer base, and it's not like, oh, I'm buying the Dark Horse because I want this to be my daily driver. Like, I get it. But a lot of people are going to buy the Dark Horse to want it to be their daily driver. And I do feel like the Dark Horse could sell a lot better. I feel like they're about 40 horsepower away from the Dark Horse really, like, cementing its place in the lineup. And because of that, because it was mismanaged, in my opinion, I'm going to give it a roasted. Rant over. Mike, let me throw the mic to you through the screen. Please take it away. With the model lineup that you know and understand, and even the stuff that you're seeing right now, where are you? Are we toasting on this one, or are we roasting on this one?
So the rant's not over. This is a toast, but it was almost a roast, believe it or not, because of the Dark Horse. And I'm just gonna get that out of the way because we're on it. That logo is the shittiest car logo in the history of all car logo. I mean, it is. I saw it for the first time at the LA Auto Show, and I was like, this has got to be a troll. Like, I cannot believe it comes with such garbage. Generally speaking, when you make a car logo, particularly on a fast car, Larry was right. You want it to look like the logo's going fast. And the whole point of that, this goes back to the 60s with the Bumblebee logo. Like, I mean, it was just, or the Roadrunner logo. Like, all of those logos for those performance cars were always something moving fast. That goes through to today. With the Mustang logos, the Hellcat logos, the Demon logo, all that stuff. Like there's a psychology behind that. Mm-hmm. The difference is a clean logo is always a clean logo. And if I had to guess, somebody tried to be all Transformers about it, because it's kind of in that sort of, the Transformers logos are always like that face that's straight on. And those were cars. So like, I think somebody was like, oh, that's cool. And like a lot of people put little Optimus Prime logos on their cars. I know that's like Dodge does that a lot. And the Dodge logo in general, or one of them, the Shield one, is actually a pretty clean logo that was on a lot of their faster cars and actually still did look pretty good. But even the SRT logo is italicized. It's like swept because it's like the idea is like it's going fast. So that's a risky move, but it's not a terrible move necessarily if you have a really solid design. The problem with the Dark Horse logo is it looks like shit. I mean, it's a terrible logo. I mean, I wouldn't put this on anything, like nothing. I mean, so this was and I was thinking about it because like, this is the trim I would probably buy if I was going to get it. But I actually might not buy it just because of the damn logo. Like until somebody comes up with something different, or if I could put it off, like it's terrible. And I know that's so superficial and dumb, but it's bad, man. It's like really bad. Like my Camaro just doesn't have a logo. Like Camaros don't have a logo. The newer ones, they just put Camaro. They just write Camaro on the side. That's it. And it's kind of always been that way. Camaro's never really had a logo. Well, that's not entirely true, but generally speaking, in modern times, it's always sort of been some variation of just the Chevy logo, which is also kind of a, benign, very benign logo. So they don't put anything on the sides of their cars either for that reason. But usually you'll want to do lettering like GTO, for instance. You just do that classy lettering. But if you're going to do an actual logo, it's got to look like it's going fast. And so this is a miss on both counts. Yep. That ran over. It is still a toast, just because of how far the car has progressed.
Okay.
The getting 315 horsepower out of a Turbo 4 is nothing to laugh at. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what a GT made 20 years ago. Like, literally a GT made that. You know, a fire-breathing V8 made that. That had literally exactly double the displacement. 2.3, it was 4.6 back then. It made 315 horsepower. At its height, back in the day, it only made like 250, 280 to 280 or something. At its height, before they ditched it for the 5.0, it made 315. And now literally half of that engine is making, I mean, I don't think it's the same bore and stroke, but it's the same basic. If you cut that engine in half, you'd have the same displacement. And it's making the same amount of power. That's really impressive. You have a lightweight, inexpensive, economical package that still makes a silly amount of power in a car that's not that heavy. That's a great car. And that's a great car for kids to pick up in 10 years on the used market too. So I think that's going to be really popular. And it's already turboed, so you can tune it to all hell. I would never laugh at a Turbo 4 Mustang, especially not this rendition. It just makes so much power. I mean, this thing will absolutely demolish my 350Z. Just make it look like standing still, you know? So that's a great initial opening offering. They finally ditched the V6. Actually, I think they've ditched it for a while now, but that thing was a boat anchor. I mean, that was a terrible motor. Realistically speaking, I don't know what kind of idiot would ever buy a V6 Mustang. Like, what the hell would you have to be? Oh, damn. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Present company excluded, of course. Of course.
That's all good. See, my feelings aren't hurt because I know why somebody would buy one, how much fun you would have in owning one and tuning it and working on it. I have great memories of my V6. So great that I still have one.
I had a V6.
I don't drive.
I had a V6 Mustang a number of years ago. I only had it for a little while. It was a new reg one. It was kind of fun, but it was funny because that car had an actual cable operated clutch. Like, it didn't have any hydraulics, so it had the heaviest clutch I had ever driven. It was pretty crazy. Yeah, it was a cheap car, but yeah. So, moving up to the V8 offering, 480 horsepower is basically what the last Bullet had, and I commended Ford last run around because it was the first time they had, up until what was it, 2020? I forget exactly what year it was, but up until the S550 generation Mustang, Ford was notorious for having the most amount of special editions of a Mustang that did absolutely nothing to performance, nothing at all. Just 50th anniversary, 35th anniversary, Bullet edition, the California special. It's just all this nonsense. And it was just like some glued on trim, and that was it. And it was just irritating. I always hated that. But I forget exactly what they did. I think they changed out the valves, maybe a different intake manifold. I forget exactly what the stuff they did for the Bullet, but it was actually a hell of a lot faster. It went from 460 to 480 horsepower, and I thought that was really, really pretty slick. That was neat. And I don't know if I don't have the details on it yet. I don't know if they've just pulled the same Bullet architecture over to the new GT. It would make sense. I would imagine that's probably what they did. Barring a few minor changes. Regardless, 480 horsepower is an absolutely insane offering for a base level, upper trim sports car, right? Like, this is barring the economy version, this is basically the base level of the, quote unquote real Mustang. And it makes 480 horsepower. That is insane. That is excellent. Like, my Camaro, when my Camaro came out, it was 426 horsepower. And everyone in the world was like, "Oh my god, that's," like, the Challengers have that, but only in their high SRT trim version. This was just the regular SS Camaro. I mean, anything over, a Viper made 400 horsepower in '95, and everyone was like, that was an earth-shattering amount of power. And now it's like we have something that's staring down the barrel of 500 horsepower. It's just a regular car. That is just absolutely insane. So that's really impressive. It's nice to see that. So that's a really strong GT offering. And it's like, it's one of those cars where, like, if I had bought a GT and then I saw the Bullet come out, I'd be pissed that I didn't buy the Bullet, because it just, all those changes. I remember I read into them. They're actually pretty cool, in a techie sort of way too. So that's neat. And it's neat to see that at least transfer over to the new GTs. That's smart. That's real smart. So I like that. And then the dark horse is the interesting one because, logo notwithstanding, we've already beat that to death. Not to beat a dead horse here, but on top of that, it's another 20 horsepower. So, it's kind of like the GT to the Bullet of last time, which I think I think Larry's right. It's light on the power bump for an entirely new sort of launch trim level. It seems a bit light because all the other muscle cars have always, when they've done that, they've had their V6 trim, they've had their V8 trim, and then they have their extra trim. And the extra trim has always been significantly more. So like the Challengers back in '08, as they started releasing their trims, they had a 200 horsepower V6, they had a 375 horsepower V8, and then their big SRT8 made the 425 horsepower, which up from 375 is actually quite a bit. Then the Camaro blew them out of the water when they came out with 300 horsepower V6, 425 horsepower V8, but their next trim was the ZL1, and that made 580. Just like that was super because it was supercharged, and that was a big jump. That like as the next trim, that was a big jump. And Mustang generally has done the same thing. It's like they got their V6 or four banger or whatever. Then they have their V8, which is their standard sort of 420 450 package. And then their other trims have always been something like a GT 350, which made a lot more power, but more importantly had the flat plane crank. No, that made a lot more power actually. I think 500 something. And then obviously they had their
I think it's like a 526, 530.
Yeah, it made a decent amount of power, just because of how and it was a 5.8. So it was like, that was a totally different engine. If you have a GT 350, don't sell it because that thing's going to be worth $1 bazillion at some point. Like those engines are very bespoke to that car, so that'll be a collector's item in the future for sure. But then they had their GT 500 as well, which is 700 horsepower or something stupid. But like, so, and it's the same thing. The new ZL1s are pulled 650 horsepower and just this crazy nonsense. And then obviously, Dodge just basically after the whole debacle with their 6.1 that only made 425, they literally were like, well, hold my beer. And they're like 700 horsepower, 750 horsepower, 825, just like they were like, we are not getting we're not getting left behind again. But they did it. But their trims were special. They were big trims. And now the Mustang, this supposed top level trim, I know all you guys are gonna be like, well, it's not the GT 350 or the GT 500. That's coming later. And that's probably true. But then it's like, well, what the hell is this dark horse thing? Like, if it was a Bullet and it came out 2 years from now, okay. Like, that's par for the course. Everyone always wants a Bullet trim. They always want the Bullet logo on the back. They want that green. They want those Bullet wheels. And they want a little bit more horsepower. Like, that's fine. But this is just, like, some weird new thing where they're like, it's the dark horse. It's like, okay, so this is supposed to be cool, but it's really... It's not that cool. It's basically you renamed the Bullet for some reason. So I don't get it, I guess. I just don't get it. I think... Right
now. They're saying street legal, track ready on the dark horse kind of advertising on the Mustang's website right now.
Yeah, but you could just
track ready.
But you could just put a track pack on a GT. That's all that is. Like that's just a track pack, right? And Mustang's been doing that for years. So I don't see it. I kind of see the 500 horsepower marketing bit because like, well, let's just launch with something that has 500 horsepower because nothing has 500 horsepower that's like a normal trim right now. Like you have to go full tilt ZL1 craziness to get 500 horsepower. Like you're buying borderline supercar at 500 horsepower, and this is like 500 horsepower in an all car. So I kind of get from a marketing standpoint where they could be coming from, but I think that trim is a bit of a miss. And honestly, I think in the future it's going to be a bit of a dark horse. So it's just like, or a black sheep, shall I say? So it's that's a miss. But otherwise, I think it's a good lineup.
I'm happy that the Mustang name continues, right? Like at the end of the day,
unlike a certain other name I don't want to talk about right now.
Well, look, if I can't have what am I trying to say here? You can't have the one that you want, so love the one that you're with. You don't get the 2024 Camaro, so you get the 2024 Mustang and close your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, just put a Camaro badge on it, and it's close
Yeah,
enough, right?
you would probably get away with it. Like you
Yeah,
probably,
on my if I took out the rear lights and put like two pod lights on each side, put a Chevy logo on the back, you know, a little Camaro on the side and a Chevy logo on the front. Yeah, people will be like, oh, like, and I say, oh yes, the new 2024 Camaro. I bet anyone who's not a car guy probably, oh okay, yeah,
yeah.
I see that.
And
Just
the
make
other
it black
thing
and you're fine to get you're good to go.
in this podcast episode of cars that could be other cars, there's two that come to mind. I've seen people actually put Ferrari emblems on their C8 Corvettes, and
Yeah, yeah.
meme a little bit with that. And like I can see that, like yeah, you know, if you didn't know about C8 Corvettes, you didn't know about mid-engine design, and then you saw one for the first time, like you're some random 8-year-old at a gas station, it's a Ferrari.
Yep.
Oh, Ferrari! Like I can
Yep,
see you
yep.
believing that. And then also this Mustang, I could see people, if you were able to just remove the taillights and put on a little Chevy little bow tie in the front, you know what I mean? You might, Mike, I'm telling you, you're
They'll
that
buy it.
close.
Yeah.
You're that close to a 2024 Camaro. You're that close.
Yeah, you're not going to get me to buy a Mustang that easily. Sorry.
Oh, this was fun. I can't wait till another big car launch comes and we can do another Toasted or Roasted. This is, again, guys, we're trying out this segment. Please let us know what you think about it. This episode is obviously going to be on YouTube and it's going to be on podcast platforms. And currently, thanks to Anchor.fm, we actually can receive comments on our podcast. So if you do see this on Spotify, I believe you can leave comments directly to our podcast there. You can also do it from the Anchor website or our podcast website, or on YouTube in the comments section. We'll be looking at all three. But we'd love to hear what you think about this segment. Should we do it more? What, you know, roasted or toasted for our roasted or toasted segment, toasted or roasted, whatever version. I don't even know which one we're going to say first or last. We just pulled it out of our butt, but it feels good. Feels good.
I can guarantee you we read all the comments because there aren't any. So, you know, there's that. But if you do comment, we'll read it and either laugh or cry or maybe both. But maybe we'll even mention you in the next podcast.
Yeah, it's the precedent has already been set. We do read the comments that we get. Mike, it's been another wild one with you, man. I enjoy podcasting with you, so thanks for bringing your A game to the Toasted or Roasted. And next time, I think we should do your car, and I'm just gonna roast it every time. Like it'll be real easy for me.
Yeah, and then we'll go race the cars and see who wins.
Yeah, me, of course.
Yeah, okay.
It'll be a literal roast it. You can all just
right into a wall. That'll be fun.
Mike, you're really small in my mirror. What's going on? Why are you so far back there? What's happening?
That's me coming. That's me coming up to lap you. That's what that is. Oh, okay. Don't worry about it.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense. Totally. Yeah. Man, I hope you have a good week. Audience, thank you for sticking around with us and enjoying the whole entire episode. Ford, I love you. I love the cars that you make, but I'm not going to hold back my feedback. I really want the Mustang to be the best-selling car you guys ever do ever, and I want it to continue street dominance while we're still doing combustion engines. So I hope you do a 2-year refresh and get rid of the stuff that we complain about. I did hear that the line was going to be short this time. It actually sounds like this model year is not going to live anywhere near as long as the other Mustang generations have in recent times. Obviously, electric has a lot to do with that. So if this is the last shebang before Ford really starts embracing V6 turbo as the new V8, like Ford, you got to do it right. You got to do right by us. So that's where I am. Mike, you got one more comment before we cut off the mics?
Yeah, normally I don't go for the Mustangs, but seeing as there is no Camaro, my hat's off to Ford for sticking to it. You know, you still did me dirty with that stupid Mustang Mach-E. That's not a Mustang, but I guess you're doing better than Chevy is right now, so I'll forgive you.
All right. If only, anyway, I was going to say a dumb joke, actually. I'm just going to end it. Good night, everybody.